So the breaking news in college football today is that the settlement between the ACC and Florida State and Clemson is coming, likely to be approved tomorrow, which is Tuesday, which means the ACC won, right? Wrong. Not correct. And I'll explain why here in this video today. So for the backstory, very quickly, those of you who have been following college football know Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, and Miami have all been pretty disenchanted with the ACC. Florida State and Clemson have led the cause, and they have been trying to get out. They filed a couple of lawsuits. There were 4 dueling lawsuits, in fact, between the ACC and Clemson and Florida State in multiple different states. It was a mess, and the end goal was Florida State and Clemson were trying to get out of the ACC as soon as possible because they're not making enough money. They have gone to far lengths, including accusing the former commissioner of the ACC of nepotism in the lawsuit to try and accomplish that, but didn't really appear like it was going anywhere. And now, as reporting indicated a couple of months ago, we are headed right toward a settlement between the two parties. So this is from ESPN. Florida State and Clemson will vote Tuesday on an agreement that would ultimately result in the settlement of 4 ongoing lawsuits between the schools and the ACC for a new revenue distribution strategy that would solidify the conference's membership for the near future. All 3 boards must agree to the settlement for it to move forward, but sources throughout the league expect a deal to be reached. And according to the sources, the settlement includes a couple of key things. All right, so pay attention here. Establishing a new revenue distribution model based on viewership and a change in the financial penalties for the league's grant of rights in June 2036, where it currently extends to right now. So 2 things gained here by all the schools. 1, a chance to make more money. There will be unequal revenue sharing in the conference. And 2, a cheaper exit fee once you hit 2030, which is a key date because that is when the Big Ten TV contract is up. So they will be able to make up to an extra $15 million based on TV viewership. That is a 5-year rolling average that will take a little bit of massaging to figure out. But basically what you have is 40% of the TV revenue that comes in will be distributed evenly. The other 60% will be distributed based on who's getting the most viewers, which is very good news for Florida State and Clemson. Although this past year, Georgia Tech actually would have been the biggest beneficiary of it. So it could also be good for schools outside of the group that we have talked about here, but you would expect them to get the most value out of this. You can also squeeze some value out of basketball. So a school like North Carolina could benefit from this. Basketball will at least be included in this brand initiative, which is what they're calling the money that is going to go toward TV viewership, but obviously at a smaller rate than football. You add that up with success initiatives, which have already been put out there by the ACC. Basically, the more success you have on the field, you will get a disproportionate amount of the revenue. You could make up to an extra $30 or so million, according to this reporting, per year. That would be have an excellent year, make it to the playoff, go deep into the playoff, perhaps win a national championship. Now you could be closing the gap significantly between the SEC, Big Ten, and yourself. The important part here, though, honestly, the bigger win, even though the short-term stuff is great, the bigger win is that the reporting indicates the price to exit the league will drop to about $100 million in 2030. At one point, it was estimated by the lawyers of Florida State that it would cost $700 million to leave the league early. $700 million down to $100 million is quite a difference, and it comes right at the perfect time, which is what you would want to negotiate. Hey, Big Ten TV contract is coming up. That's a chance, a golden opportunity for them to expand if they're going to. We need to be ready to have a reasonable number, know what that number is, and then be ready to cut the cord and go. That's pretty big. That is pretty big. The ACC, by the way, at the time when Florida State's attorneys had said, hey, we estimated it'll cost about $700 million, they actually said there's not a number because the grant of rights is ironclad. So we don't have to give you a number. We're at no obligation to do that, and we're obviously not going to. So you can't even put a number on this thing. Well, now they have a number. And by the way, the number before 2030 is expected to be around $200 million, according to On3's Andy Staples. So even that is much more reasonable. And it's been lots of talk of private equity, private capital coming into play in college athletics. Perhaps that is a road that those schools could still go down, but likely not. Likely what you have here is the table set for over the next 5 years. The ACC stays intact. It does regain some stability as far as that is concerned, but with an eye on a lot of reconfiguration in college sports starting right around 2030 at the end of the decade, when we're going to see the Big Ten TV contract come up. The Big 12 TV contract will also be coming up. And even if it's not the Big Ten, it could be the SEC, because the key question will be at that time, does the Big Ten feel like they would make more money per school by adding Florida State and Clemson? If the answer is yes, not only would they be interested, but then the SEC might be interested in blocking those schools from going to the Big Ten, right? Just kind of a preemptive strike to keep the Big Ten from getting even stronger. So that's the dream scenario, obviously, for a Florida State or Clemson playing out here. This, in fact, was the direct quote from Andy Staples' story. A source told On3 a school could pay about $200 million to leave the ACC once the settlement goes through Tuesday. So literally tomorrow, I guess depending on when you're viewing this, Tuesday, you could write a $200 million check and get out of the conference. That figure falls to actually well below $100 million should a school wish to exit the league after the 2029-2030 school year. So even well below $100 million, according to Andy Staples, was quoted at more like around $100 million in the ESPN story. So that's a big win. That's a massive win. And that is why it's tough to really take this at face value and be like, oh, well, the ACC got the stability they wanted. Yes, the ACC got stability most likely for the next 5 years. It's not going to fall apart tomorrow. It's not going to fall apart next year. There were a couple times where, people thought one of those August deadlines that was coming up for Florida State, like they might just say, screw it, we're going to go ahead and make the move and challenge this in court and see what happens. None of that happens. Okay. Cooler heads did prevail there. So it's going to drag this out longer and give us a period of relative stability here. And in the meantime, those schools will have a chance to make more money anyway, which will at least somewhat appease them. It's not going to fully catch up Florida State or Clemson to the SEC or Big Ten in any of these scenarios because, one, when a new playoff contract kicks in 2026, the SEC and Big Ten are each getting 29% of that money. The ACC gets 17%, so they will just be at a disadvantage there. Obviously, the TV contract puts them at a massive $30 to $40 million disadvantage every single year already. So they will not fully close the gap. And even then, the Big Ten's exploring private equity. We saw that story come out in late January. So there are a lot of things that those leagues are going to do to maintain an advantage, but this will get Florida State and Clemson closer, bridge the gap while they wait for the real prize that they obtained, which was having a number, knowing what it will cost specifically to get out in 2030 when it looks like the tectonic plates of college football will be moving again. One other thing to keep in mind from this story, and I will talk about this on my next live show, is that this is a precedent-setting type of thing from the ACC, the unequal revenue sharing, that is. The next time that Big Ten contract does come up, you can bet Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, they're going to want more of the revenue than Northwestern and Purdue at the bottom of the league, right? I think you are going to start to see this now in other leagues moving forward. The big brands are going to start demanding even more of this. This is how the sport has been moving. Everyone's greedy. Everyone's grabbing for every last dollar that they can, especially now that they're going to have to be paying the student athletes. So watch for it. You're going to see that come, I guarantee it, in the Big Ten, that they are going to want the scales tilted toward who's drawing the most viewership and who's having the most success. So you can also look at what's happening today as a loss for some of the bottom schools in the Big Ten and the SEC, because it is going to wind up costing them more money. Obviously, kind of short-ish term losers here are the bottom tier schools in the ACC as well. They're going to be making a little bit less money every year, but that's the trade-off for actually having a conference and actually having some stability. So hope that explains it all. Like I said, I will have more on the next live show. Make sure you are tuned in for those, typically Wednesdays and Sundays here on the channel. My schedule this week, a little bit up in the air. We'll see, but I will keep you up to date if you follow along. You can also follow me on Twitter at JL Kurtz, and make sure you subscribe for the Big 12 newsletter, Open for Business. It's ofbnews.com to get subscribed, or just click the link in the description of the video. Take care, and I will talk to you all soon.